Chapter 45. Incarnating Death. Kang Tian was shocked at his words. Even cultivators like the Dan Emperor could not resist the temptation of this demonic skill, thus showing the terrifying nature of this skill. After knowing the terrifying nature of this demonic skill, the old me sealed it in the reverse heavenly cauldron and never took it out again after that. Emperor Dan continued, his face very grave as he said in a deep voice, "It wasn't until one day later that I suddenly received a transmission from that close friend from back then. And there was only one sentence in it, which was urging me to never cultivate that demonic technique." Old me instantly guessed that that close friend must have secretly recorded a copy for himself to secretly cultivate when he recorded the magic skill in the first place. What happened to that person in the end? Kang Tian asked curiously. Emperor Dan took a deep breath, gazed at Kang Tian, and said in a deep voice, "That close friend ended up being completely demonized. From a hallowed righteousness expert, he became a murderous fiend. And in the end, he was beheaded by the Heavenly Tao sect, 100 Flowers sect, and 10,000 Buddhist sect, 3 major sects of dozens of top experts who all joined together to kill him." Kang Tian's face sank as he heard this. This demonic power was so terrifying that even a strong person like Emperor Dan ended up being demonized by the demonic power. "Kid, to practice or not to practice, it's up to you. The old man will warn you one last time. Once you enter the demonic path, there is no turning back." After Dan Lao finished speaking, he turned into a ray of light and scurried into Kang Tian's body. Kang Tian looked at the black jade slip in his hand with a heavy face, his purple eyes flickering. To cultivate or not to cultivate? It was difficult to choose in Kang Tian's mind, and he couldn't help but close his eyes. Instantly, a familiar face surfaced in his mind. There was Ant King's kind gaze, the great elder's pleased gaze, and the terrified gazes of those one clan's children and subordinates. In the end, what was presented to Kang Tian was a demonic blood-colored passageway, which was the passageway leading to the back mountain of the royal mansion. The passageway was piled high with the corpses of the Wong family's children and subordinates, and countless unjust souls were hovering in the sky. Kang Tian was violently awakened. He opened his eyes. Purple light flashed in his eyes. His mind finally detached a divine thought and probed towards the black jade slip in his hand. Star-absorbing technique. Immediately, 4 black fonts were imprinted in Kang Tian's mind, as if they were 4 ferocious ghosts, fiercely pestering Kang Tian, making it impossible for him to get rid of them, and he couldn't help but continue reading. Star-absorbing technique. Kang Tian's eyes condensed as his divine mind continued to probe downwards, and an obscure and difficult to understand recitation was immediately imprinted into his mind. He scrutinized it carefully, and the more he looked at it, the more it made sense, and he unconsciously looked downwards. In the beginning of the Heavenly Tao, a lifetime of all things, transforming heaven and earth, seemed to be expounding on the beginning of the Tao, and it was mesmerizing. Sucking the sky and taking in the earth, all things returned to one. Kang Tian's heart and soul vibrated. This is the beginning of the devil's power of greatness. Can devour all things and use them for their own body. The end of the viciousness. Wuxia Devil Road, devouring all things to one, casting immortal devil body. Kang Tian color change. The magic power heart law suddenly changed. As if the sky collapsed, a cultivation of hell scene appeared in his sea of consciousness. Ggia suddenly. A single black font, transformed into a sheet of demonic ingrates, rushed into Kang Tian's mind. And those mournful hissing and resentful screams were incessant, causing him to uncontrollably close his eyes. The devil sea is limitless. Transform into a great devil and devour all things. The Heavenly Tao is impermanent. Replace it with your body. A monumental demonic sound impacted Kang Tian's sea of consciousness, as if an ancient demonic father was constantly tempting Kang Tian. And even though Kang Tian's will was strong, he couldn't help but have his mind fluctuate. Good and evil exist in a single thought. Emperor Dan's loud voice resounded in Kang Tian's mind. as if it was an inconspicuous bright light, but it gave Kang Tian a hint of encouragement. In the darkness, Kang Tian tightened his mind and will. The opposite is true when things are extreme. Take in yin and absorb yin with yang. Yin and yang mingle. The Taiji returns to unity. The sea accepts all rivers, all things are one. Only the devil, swallowing the sky, devouring yin and yang. Not knowing how long had passed, Kang Tian sat in silence in the stone cave, constantly being impacted by the demonic sounds. He relied on his strong will and hardened himself to finish reading all the recitals of the star, absorbing grand technique. These recitals were deeply embedded in Kang Tian's mind. How could they not disappear? Outside the stone cave, Wang Tixiong and Xiao Jin were still waiting anxiously. It had been 7 days and 7 nights since Kang Tian had entered the stone cave. What a terrifying devil skill! What a vicious devil skill! What a powerful devil skill! 7 days later, in the middle of the stone cave, Kang Tian finally opened his eyes with a shocked expression. Only after reading the star-absorbing technique did he truly understand the terrifying and viciousness of this demonic power. The ultimate goal of this demonic power was to devour all things in heaven and earth, and then replace heaven and earth himself, incarnating the heavenly Tao. The most powerful thing about this magic skill was nothing could not be swallowed. Kang Tian's eyes brightened as he operated the star-absorbing grand technique's mantra, and immediately the surrounding heaven and earth spiritual chi was like a flood that had been extinctly lifted, constantly converging towards him at a speed that was shocking. Star-absorbing grand technique. Kang Tian's eyes exploded with light. A low gulp came out from his throat, and his entire body immediately seemed to transform into a black hole, devouring the converging heaven and earth spiritual chi into it. This kind of devouring, as if it was a direct plundering, made Kang Tian's heart incomparably shocked and excited. However, he still wasn't satisfied. He simply took out all of the remaining returning Yuan Dan from the reverse heavenly cauldron, and then operated the star-absorbing grand technique to devour all of them, transforming them into a single channel of thick true chi and pouring them into his body. Instantly, his cultivation level skyrocketed. The middle of the 7th level of foundation establishment, the late 7th level of foundation establishment, the peak of the 7th level of foundation establishment. So refreshing. Kang Tian's face was filled with excitement, immersed in the joy of his rising cultivation. The star-absorbing technique was like a black hole, devouring all of the energy of the return to origin pill and then transforming it into pure true chi and providing it to him, which simply greatly shortened the time it took for him to refine it. After an hour, all of the returning Yuan Dan in Kang Tian's hand disappeared, and at this moment, his cultivation had already reached the peak of the 7th level of foundation establishment, and he could break through to the 8th level of foundation establishment at any time. If he were to cultivate on his own, even with the help of the returning Yuan Dan, it would take a year to reach this realm. But now he only needed 1 hour to complete it. How heaven-defying was this? What a powerful star-absorbing technique. It's a pity that there isn't enough Yuan Dan. Kang Tian was surprised, but inevitably had some regrets. If he had enough returning Yuan Dan, he felt that he could directly advance to the Jidan stage. Kid, you already have 1 foot in the devil's way. One must know that the rapid increase in cultivation has already caused your realm to start to become unstable. If your will was weaker, I'm afraid that you would have already entered the devil's path. Emperor Dan's sighing voice came out. Elder Dan, don't worry. This demonic technique is indeed terrifying, but as you said, as long as I have a strong will, it can only become a sword in my hand and be used for me. Kang Tian sniffed and said proudly, his eyes full of confidence. A dike of 1,000 miles collapses in an anthill. A drop of water can penetrate a stone. You shouldn't be too confident. Even the strongest of wills will have times when it falters. At that time, this magic skill will become a double-edged sword. Emperor Dan still wanted to try to persuade, but unfortunately, Kang Tian simply wouldn't listen. Elder Dan, don't worry. If there really is that day, just kill me with your own hands. I have no complaints or regrets. Kang Tian shook his head, a stubborn flame dancing in his purple eyes. Emperor Dan sighed helplessly at his words and said softly, "That's fine. This is your choice, so I won't try to persuade you any further. But I have a Buddhist mind-fixing mantra here. You must cultivate it. It might help you." Saying that, he passed on a mantra to Kang Tian. Kang Tian did not object this time. Although he was confident in his own will, he also knew that Emperor Dan meant well. It was better to be cautious. This centrifugal incantation was indeed divine, just like the star-absorbing technique. It was deeply embedded into Kang Tian's sea of consciousness, like a great Buddha, constantly emitting a warm golden glow. Kang Tian's mind, which was originally unstable due to the rapid increase in cultivation, surprisingly calmed down after silently reciting the heart-fixing mantra. What a powerful demonic technique! Kang Tian, who had calmed down, realized that just now he had fallen into the path of this demonic power. His eyes flickered, and he knew that he had just immersed himself in the excitement of the rapid increase in his cultivation and could not pull himself out of it. I am afraid that if this went on, he would really become a demon. Kang Tian couldn't help but be shocked. He continued to silently recite the centering incantation a few times before he left the stone cave. Outside the stone cave, when Wang Tixiong and Little Gold saw Kang Tian come out, they both greeted him with a happy face. "Tiana, Z." Wang Tixiong hurriedly walked up to Kang Tian when he saw him. Little Gold was even faster than him, jumping onto Kang Tian's shoulder in a flash, squeaking excitedly and messing up Kang Tian's hair. "Tiana, are you alright?" Wang Tixiong looked at this grandson in front of him with some doubts. As a cultivator, he had an intuition that this grandson in front of him seemed to have changed in some way. Surprisingly, he felt a hint of danger and an evil feeling. In the end, Wang Tixiong shook his head, thinking that it was his own illusion. After all, this in front of him was his own grandson. "Grandpa, I made you worry." Kang Tian couldn't help but apologize when he saw the worried-looking grandpa. "It's good that you're fine." Wang Tixiong smiled kindly and touched Kang Tian's head, but was then knocked away by Xiao Jin. This was its territory. When Wang Tixiong saw this, he couldn't help but smile. Kang Tian also laughed out loud. The moon was like a scimitar, hanging in the sky. The entire back mountain of the royal mansion was shrouded in silence. In the night sky, the weak moonlight and dots of starlight sprinkled down did not bring brightness to the back mountain. The dense mountain forests were still pitch black. On the passageway leading to the back mountain of the royal mansion, several wooden towers several feet high towered over the area, each of which was guarded by several Lin family experts, all of whom were alertly watching out for any movement in the woods of the back mountain. Swish! Suddenly, a black shadow raced through the mountain forest, bringing with it a strong wind that shook the leaves of the trees. This black shadow was strangely fast, continuously tapping a few times on the tops of several trees, and finally he landed on the tip of one of the tallest trees, and was lying prone and secretly surveying the several wooden towers in front of him. Accompanied by a bit of starlight, a young face could be vaguely seen, his bright eyes flashing purple in the darkness of the night. This was Kang Tian. Kang Tian carefully observed the several wooden towers in front of him. Those were Lin Baishan's eyes to monitor the entire back mountain. As long as they were there, no one could walk out of the back mountain without a word. In the center of these wooden towers, there was also an attic that was not too high or too low. Inside it was brightly lit, and from time to time, a few loud laughs came out. "Elder Dan, can you determine Lin Baishan's location?" In the darkness of the night, Kang Tian asked in a low voice. He had a big plan tonight. This plan was very risky, but once it succeeded, it would give Lin Baishan and the others a hard lesson. This was the first step towards his revenge. "That old brat is in that cabin, cunning and ruthless." Emperor Dan's voice rang out. Kang Tian was surprised when he heard this and looked towards the several small cabins next to the Distant attic. He had thought that Lin Beishan would stay in the attic, but he didn't expect it to be in these inconspicuous cabins. If he didn't have this great god of Dan Emperor in, I'm afraid that he would have really fallen for Lin Beishan's trick. Since that's the case, then I'll go over there openly and honestly.